I can be proactive outside of times of crisis is an affirmation that I read about a year ago while at a self-care getaway for a day. And we can flip that and reverse it and say, I don't need crisis to be proactive. And in that affirmation, when I first read it, I didn't understand it right away. I didn't fully comprehend it because the place that I had been in, the city that I'm in, had been in a state of crisis and still is somewhat in a state of crisis, depending on relatively how you define crisis, for the past 4 years. It was definitely in a state of crisis 2020, 2021. And throughout that time in 2020 and 2021, there was a lot of community organizing, there was a lot of press conferences, there was a lot of work to be done to undo a lot of the things that were going on in this particular city and the people that were being harmed by the city, by the state. And we had a lot of work to do, and a lot of building happened, a lot of growth and expansion and change happened. And throughout that time, what we saw was a lot of beautiful things occur, a lot of people change, a lot of evolution. And in that time, we also saw kind of the truth of the city and the truth of what's been going on. And it was a time of crisis. And in that time, when I say we, I mean a lot of people in the community were engaging in protests and in community actions and meetings and Zoom calls and conversations. And it wasn't even daily. This was probably once every 6 hours. I would go to sleep, wake up in the morning, get a phone call or a text, and then head to an action to help out a family, to help out community members, or to help out neighbors. And in this time, this constant crisis, constant reaction, it began to be normalized. And I began to believe that the only times I could be of any use was in crisis. And although I felt that I was very much so of use, and I was helping, and I was supporting, and I was supplying all that I could in these instances, there is a very, very tall toll to be paid when you believe that your only proactivity is in crisis. And in reading this affirmation at this getaway, I had to reflect on, could I be proactive without crisis? And it was an extremely tough truth to realize. And I think about past family members, and I give this to you, people that you know, or parts of your life that you may have experienced where you went through a tough time, and in that tough time, you made some changes, you made some adjustments, you did some things that really helped in, built up your life, or evolved your life, or even upgraded, but I just want transformed. That's the word I was looking for. You did some things that transformed your life. And in that transformation, you then began to be a new person. And you look back at the crisis or the moment of crisis and you say, oh, wow, really grew out of that. And then it may be another time of crisis and we grow out of that as well. And we start to look back at these moments where we think, maybe am I only growing or only transforming when there's crisis? And do I need crisis to become a different person or be proactive? And the answer is, obviously for me, yes, I can be proactive outside of crisis. It's the ability to see that, to understand that, to know it, and to recognize what is the environment that I'm keeping around me. What are the things that I'm reading around me? What are the things that I'm absorbing in my body to sometimes keep this crisis going, and to keep this idea going that I can only be of use in crisis, or perchance even go further with it, perhaps life is crisis. Perhaps is that a belief that I have? And we talk about veterans who come back from war, and it's tough for them to be outside of war, even though they know that they are not in a war. They have the mentality of somebody who's still in that war. I remember reading about a veteran who didn't really have any signs of PTSD until in his 90s. He began to break down and began to, as some of them say, crack and exhibit behaviors of PTSD and loss, grief, trauma, sadness, depression. And I think as the book title says, the body keeps the toll. And when we're in crisis and we think we're out of it, our bodies may still think that we are. May even still think that we need it to be the people that we are. And one thing I wanted to ask you in this video is, have you ever incurred a situation where you believe that if you aren't there doing the work, nobody else will be? If you don't do it, then nobody will. And when you think that, when you believe that, how does your body feel? How do you feel? How does the circumstances look to you outside of that? I talk about this often. My mother was a clinical oncology cancer nurse specialist. I'll say that 10 times fast. And when I speak to her about her job, or when she was in the job, there were many times she felt that if she didn't do the thing, then nobody in the hospital would. And it wasn't based in reality, because somebody in the hospital would do it. However, being in a hospital, working with people in the winter of their lives, the perceivable winter of their lives, at a time of crisis, sometimes or many times she felt that if she didn't do the thing, nobody would. And so being in that state of mind, believing that she was the only one that could do the thing at the time, created an extreme amount of pressure, an extreme amount of anxiety. The weight is unimaginable. And when we talk about anxiety, there's one mentor who said, I want somebody to come up and speak to their anxiety. This was in a group setting. It might have been somebody who's died, or it could be that you got an A-. We're not here to judge, because the feeling can be the same sometimes. The withdrawal or the sense of loss can feel the same. And it's not here to judge it. But when we talk about anxiety and being in a state of crisis, what does that bring about? And we talk about cortisol levels, and a lot of times throughout the work that I do or was doing, still do, when you go into a state of survival, what your body does is it entirely suppresses your immune system, because it's in fight or flight. It's saying, I got to take care of everything right now. Can't deal with this long-term stuff. I got to deal with right now. And if I don't deal with right now, there may not be a tomorrow, perceivably. I'm not saying that's the reality. I'm not saying that's not the reality, but that's what your body and mind feel. And so with that setting, the pressure again is unimaginable. And we feel that only now, only in this state of crisis, only in exigent circumstances, only in a state of bellicose and war times, can we truly create change and transformation. However, the challenge to you is, what about outside of that? What does it mean to you to transform and create change and upgrade and develop being a more evolved person or a better person outside of perceivable war times or crisis or danger? Can we do that thing before it gets to the point that it feels like mortality is knocking on our door for any situation? Can we get to that point where we actually preemptively take care of something before it comes to a situation where it feels like this may be the end? We talk about this in relationships all the time with dealing with something only when there's a big argument or conversation or a big disagreement? Can you handle certain conversations before they even start? And the answer is obviously yes. How do you go about that? And the real big question is, what does it look like to you to be proactive outside of crisis? And although we can be proactive, build, expand, and become better people within crisis, what does your life look like doing that outside of it? I'll finish up on this last example. When in a state of thinking proactivity can only happen in crisis or arguments or disagreements or resistance, we can apply this to family or the workplace, where we're like, oh man, here it comes. You're going into that dinner with the family, or you're going into that meeting at the workplace, and you're preemptively preparing for this argument to occur. And even though it may not happen, even though it may not be real, you still feel yourself getting ready for this potential conflict. And in doing that, sometimes we end up creating an actual conflict, or being ready for some type of argument. We just might snap and create it. So living in the mode of battle, living in the mode of crisis, believing that it always has to be like this, what has that done to your mentality? What has that done to your life? And outside of that, on the flip, because I always want to look on the other side. You gotta forgive me here. There's a train here that's just sitting here for most of this video, and that's okay. But the thing is that what does being proactive look like outside of crisis? Peace times, tranquility, balance. We talk about this in therapy. Keeping a space in your heart where you know the truth is, where you can keep a bit of peace, where you protect that peace, or you have that balance right there, somewhere in your heart that you just kind of build out for yourself. And when you have that, you can always go to it. And you can ask yourself, what is being proactive? What is building? What does my life look like when it's creating? What does my life look like when it's expanding outside of crisis?